Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing. This is our first show of the 2025 gardening season. And if you're new to joining us, welcome. You can see these Facebook Lives live on Sunday mornings on our Facebook page, Mason House Gardens Let's Get Growing. And we put them up onto our YouTube page after that. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram as well. We're going to take you through the whole gardening season, looking at things to be doing at every time of the year, looking at interesting plants, whether it be trees, shrubs, tropicals, water plants, everything just about. Lots of techniques, lots of the way we do things. So I hope you join us and watch our shows for the whole season. We're in the first bit of January here, and it is time to get started for the season. We've still got a while of winter left, but there are a few things that we need to get started right away to get a jump and be ready for the spring season. And one of the things, we're going to do a couple of things today. The first one we're going to do is we're going to sow some leeks and onions. Leeks and onions from seed are very easy, but you do need to start them early. So we always start them in January. We grow them in containers from January until early April. And as soon as we can get out into the vegetable garden or into the raised beds in April, we plant our onions. The nice thing about onions and leeks is because the foliage is sort of grassy and that, it's a pretty easy one to start indoors and keep going. We'll talk about them after they germinate a bit more. And we'll come back to them a couple of times before they go out into the garden. So if you want to see our process for doing that, we will catch up to that over the next following weeks. What we're going to sow today is we've got some Walla Walla onions from West Coast Seeds. Now, these are a very famous Pacific Northwest onion. Very, very mild, sweet onion. We'll see how they do in our climate. Growing-wise, they should be fine, but kind of like the Vidalia onions from Georgia, sometimes the flavor is not exactly what you would expect from where they are grown famously. So we're going to try the Walla Walla onions in the garden. Doesn't really matter, where they come from necessarily, but when you look at the instructions, West Coast Seed is from the West Coast, of course, and you can start your onions there in the fall. For us, this is sort of cheating that system by starting them now in January and then transplanting out into April. The nice thing about that April transplanting for onions and leeks is that they're very hardy and can take frost and snow, late frost that'll come through April in our area. They take that without any trouble. So it's a great crop to get started. You definitely don't have to wait until late May to get things going in the vegetable garden. And we will cover all that as we go through the season. So with our onions, you generally get quite a few onions in a packet. These guys, there's a gram of seed here. So that's about 245, 250 seeds. So we're going to sow these right into a tray. We're not ever going to transplant them out of that tray. We're going to keep them growing in the tray until we move them into the garden. So it's a pretty easy process as well. So what we've done, we've got our soilless mix here. We use the soilless mix because they're completely sterile when you start, and they're easy to work with. These are the ProMix type soils. ProMix is one of the brands that you can get. Then usually if you ask for it by name, places know what you're asking for and have it. The trays, I use these trays when I'm doing something like this. I get these trays from the dollar store. They're super easy. They come with a hood. And as you can see, I've used these a lot, but it's a whole contained little system. Very easy. And I don't know, I think they're about $1 a piece. So we use them till they fall apart or till we step on them and crush them. And they're great. Now, when we're sowing seed like the onions, we're not going to just broadcast seed all over these. What we're going to do is we're going to make little furrows. And I think it's probably easiest we can do that just with a pencil. And we can just sort of make a few rows in the seed tray with the indent of a pencil. Just make that little indent just like that. Just so we have a little trench to plant the seed into. So we'll take our onion seed here. Now these are loose in the packet, which just makes it a little easier, because we can then use the packet as our seed sower. So you can see, here's our seed here. I'll come up a little closer. Here's our onion seed here. It's pretty big, pretty easy to handle. Okay. And usually what I do is I take the seed pack and I make it into its own little seed sower. So there's lots of little seed sowing devices out there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the seed and we're going to very gently drop the seed into the little furrows that I made. We're going to use it very, very sparse to start with, because we want the seed to have a little bit of space to grow. So very sparse. All right, so we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows in the tray here. I'm almost out of my seed. Where I started, I was very thin, so I'm going to go back with the last little bit and just fill in that last row. So there's not much to see now, but I've got my rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got seed spaced sort of evenly down the rows. In a couple of spots, I've got it a bit thick, so I'll just take my pencil and I'll just spread them out a little bit more, just so we get them fairly even and the seeds have been a root. Now, what we're going to do is we can then just push the soilless mix over the seed. Just like that. Firm it down. You want to make sure your seed has a good connection with the potting mix. And then what we're going to do with these ones, because they're fairly short term, we're just going to give a light top dress of vermiculite. We use vermiculite and perlite for covering seeds. Whoops, that's the perlite. Wrong one. Hang on. Vermiculite right here. We'll talk about the perlite in a minute. Vermiculite and perlite are both volcanic rock products. They both do a different job when they're added to potting soils and things. Vermiculite is like little sponges, and it holds moisture. So when you've got a potting mix that's mostly peat moss, when it's dry, does not like to absorb moisture. So vermiculite will grab moisture in a potting mix and hold it there while the peat moss absorbs it. Perlite, on the other hand, is more like a little hard rock And it helps open up soilless mixes and potting mixes so that you don't get the peat moss or the soil mix clumping together. Perlite helps open that up. So we've got our onions sown here. Very simple. Make sure you label them. You will never remember. So we've got onion, Walla Walla. And the date today is January 5th. There we go. Now, next year, when we think, geez, when did we start those stupid onions? Then we'll say, oh, it's January 5th. And we can look back and go, was it a good time? Should we have started later? Don't know. Okay, we're going to go over here now with our tray, because it's time to water the tray in. So we don't water our seed trays from the top. If we took our hose and just went over the top like this, we're going to kick seeds all over the place. We're going to make a real mess. So what we've done with these seed trays, we've poked holes in the bottom, because they don't come with holes in the bottom. We've poked holes in the bottom, and we're going to sit them in a tray of water and just let them float and soak up as much moisture as they can. So we'll leave that for a few minutes. We'll let it just sort of gently collect water. That way we're not disturbing the surface, and we won't kick the seed around. So we'll come back to that. We're going to go on to our next step here. So like I said, we'll do that with the onions. Those are the Walla Wallas from West Coast Seeds, a great Canadian seed company. The other one we're going to do for our garden is we're going to do this one here from Renee's Garden. Now, Renee's Garden is in California, but they offer a lot of interesting seeds for gardeners, and they do have a lot of interesting seeds for container use, especially vegetables. And this one sounded interesting. This is called Primor Baby Leeks. They're sort of a dwarf leek. So we thought we would try them as we, we have limited space in our raised beds. So you can harvest these as slim baby thin leeks like green onions, or let them mature a bit bigger through the season. So we're going to try those. Should be an interesting one to give a try to for this year. Now, because we're in January, and we could have started this earlier. We could have started this in December, but things were still busy in December because it was nice outside, so I never got around to it. So we're starting it in January. And that is sowing our winter seeds. So sowing perennials, primarily that need stratification. Now, what stratification is sowing the seed, getting moisture in the seed, and then exposing the seed to a cold period. So there's quite a few perennials, many, many, many trees and shrubs especially, that need that stratification period, or the seed will not germinate. It'll just simply sit in the seed pot until it gets that cold spell. And that cold spell could be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks of cold to 3 to 4 months of cold. So we need to treat the seed a little differently than if we were just going to sow them and put them under lights or put them on a windowsill. So I've got my tray of soilless mix here. I'm going to go into my seed trays. And this is how I keep my seeds organized. We use these great, they call them photo sorters, but who has photos anymore? But they're a great tray. Every time a Michael's coupon comes out, I use it on one of these. So we've got lots of seed in this one. let's just take something. Let's just see what we've got here. It's an easy one to do. Get lots of seed going here. Just one that's got a big enough seed that we can see what we're doing. No, yeah. Okay, we'll do this primula here. Why not? So this is Primula burmanica we're going to sow. Primula burmanica is a bog primula. We have it growing in our little fake bog in our garden. It's a candelabra type, so it has tiers of flowers. Blooms for a very long time. Super easy to grow. But the seed does need that chilling period to germinate. It actually reseeds in the garden, but we always start a bunch from seed. So what we're going to do is we've got a pot of, slightly moist, soilless mix here. We're going to firm it down. Make sure it's quite firm in the pot there, because these are going to be sitting for a while. So if you don't firm soilless mix down at the start, it's going to sink, and you're going to have a half a pot full of soil if you're not careful. So let me just see if I've got my little snips here. So we're going to take the primula seed that I've collected from our own plants. They're in an envelope here. We don't fully clean our own seeds, so there's a bit of chaff on them, but it actually, with a very small seed, it helps us. It helps us a bit to see just where the seed is. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change my mind. I don't like the look of that seed. I'm going to grab something different. All right, let's do this guy. This is another small seed. Lobelia cardinalis, the cardinal flower. It's a gorgeous native perennial for wet areas. We grow this in our little bog right next to that primula. Doesn't self-sow in there, so we'll grow it from seed. Seed is very tiny on this, so we're going to show you how we do a very tiny seed. So we've got our pot, we've got it firmed in, we've got our packet of seed, and if you can look and see, Laura, I'm going to show you just how tiny the seed is here. I'm going to put a little bit in my hand. So there is Lobelia cardinalis seed. It's really tiny, almost dust-like in its size. So how we treat seed like this is we take our pot, we go to our perlite.
Yeah, what was the primula you said?
Primula burmanica. And it's a wonderful primula. We'll look at it again. I just didn't like the look of that pack of seeds. So it's a beautiful red candelabra primula for the bog. So this is perlite. And I'll get a little bit of vermiculite here. I'll show you the difference. So here's the perlite and vermiculite. Vermiculite is like little sponges. Perlite's like little light rocks. So that's the difference. Vermiculite holds moisture. Perlite creates airspace and keeps mixes open. So we're going to use perlite for these. And what I do with these tiny seeds is I sprinkle perlite on the surface of the pot. Just so I get a coverage on the soil. Just like that, okay? So we've got a coverage of perlite there. Then I take this exceptionally fine seed, and you can see there's lots of it in there, and we just sprinkle that over the perlite. Now what that does is it ensures, and that's enough seed, there's probably 100 seeds or more in there, there's probably 10,000 seeds in the envelope. When you do tiny seeds like that, if you sowed them on the surface of the pot and then sprinkled your top dressing on it, they would be buried too deeply. They likely wouldn't get enough light and they wouldn't germinate. So what we do is we sprinkle them on top of our soil covering. We give it a few taps like that to settle the seed in between the nooks and crannies of the perlite, and then we're done. So, after that, always label Lobelia cardinalis. And this is a dark leaf form. It is January the 5th. And then what we're going to do, once we've sown our whole tray of different varieties here, then we go back over to our soaking station. And again, we set the pot in there and just, I usually hold them in the, keep them in the tray, and just let the pot sit and soak up the moisture. Now, as we go over here, step over lupin, you can see that our onions have soaked up all the moisture they need. The vermiculite is full of moisture, so they're done. We're going to take them over here. They're going to sit up on the shelf under lights. We're going to get our humidity cover. And that's it. They're just going to sit there now. We will keep an eye on them. We'll check them every day for germination. We'll keep an eye on the moisture level. But with the hood on, as moisture evaporates, it condensates in the lid and drips back down into the tray. So you don't need to add much moisture to these again. What you need to think about, though, is the temperature. Very often you're told, you start seeds, get them on a light stand, get them under lights, put them on a heat mat, keep them warm. And for some things, that's fine. If you were sowing some annual seeds, maybe coleus seed or things like that, yeah, you would have that seed on a heat mat to keep it warm, to keep the soil warm. And we'll look at that another day. But for something like an onion that's a cool crop, you don't need that. And in fact, even room temperature might be a bit cool for it, or a bit warm for them at night. So if you've got a spot in the house or a cool windowsill where the temperature goes down to about, 12, 14 degrees maybe at night, if it goes up during the day to sort of room temperature, 21, 22, and then cools back down at night, that's perfect. Many, many seeds, especially of cool crops and perennials, love that cooler night, slightly warmer day, bit of fluctuation in temperature, really helps in germination for many plants. We're going to do our onions and leeks like that. We're going to do our parsley like that. Our perennials, if we were doing some perennials, they would get that same cool treatment. Some perennials will get the warm treatment, and some perennials, like the lobelia we just did, are going to go right out into the cold because they need that cold. And that's what we're talking about today, is the stratification. So we're letting that seed pot soak. As we do that, because the seed is so small, maybe we'll sow another tray, another pot of the lobelia. You want to be careful not to overcrowd your seed pots. And with tiny seed like this, it's pretty easy to do. We're going to get a bit of our perlite in there again. There we go. We'll go back to our lobelia seed. And We'll sprinkle a dusting of seed in there. Again, we probably put about 100 seeds in there. Tap, 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 tap. We'll put the label on in a minute. And then into the water it goes. Again, soaking up the water from the bottom. With tiny seed like that, if we water from the top, we're washing that seed too deep, not going to germinate. So we're going to be very careful about that. Bigger seed might be a little bit easier to deal with, and we'll look at that when we're doing our sweet peas and things in a few weeks' time. But for now, this is how we do. We got our lobelia. Cardinal is dark leaf. January 5th, 2025. And I'm going to put 2025 on the perennial seeds because sometimes perennial seeds can take a long time. So we'll set that in there. Now our other one, it's not quite there yet. It's getting close. But what we'll do is we'll now prepare what we do with them to put them outside. Because these seeds are going to go outside into the winter, and they're going to stay there until spring. So what we do with these seeds when we've got them all sown is we get these containers, a few different kinds. These are from Canadian Tire. You grab them when they're on sale. Make sure you have the ones that fit a tray. So that whole tray of sown seed, will sit in here. You don't need to put holes in the bottom. You're hardly going to need to water these. Once these have soaked up the moisture in our soaking area, they're not going to need to be watered again until spring. Okay? So you don't need to worry about drainage holes. I use these plastic tubs. They latch on. The lids are pretty secure. I don't want mice getting into these trays, and these boxes do the thing. I'm sure if I drilled holes in there for drainage, then I'd have mice finding their way in those drainage holes. Once all the seed is sown and in there, that's it. That's all we do. Ready to go outside. Now, one last step in that process. We're sowing the seed today. We're going to put them outside in 2 or 3 days. Why we do that is if we just took this and put it right outside today after we sowed the seeds won't have time to absorb moisture. The water's just going to freeze. We want the seed to absorb moisture, start getting it thinking about germination, and then go through its cold period. So we're going to sow all the seeds. We're going to do 18 pots in the tray, put the lid on, let it sit indoors for 2 days, and then they're outside until spring. Now, why I labeled that with 2025 on that seed pod is because some seeds, and it's kind of goes by, the longer it takes a seed to germinate, the more rare the plant is. You may have some seeds that take 2 years to germinate, that need to go through the chilling process, the stratification process twice. A peony would be a good example of that. Ecteas or Cimicifugas, another example of that, where the seed needs to be sown, go through a cold period, go through a warm summer period, and then another cold period before they germinate. So outside in the cold, I have a couple of these trays with seed I sowed at this time last year, still hoping for germination come this spring. So you never want to throw your seed pots out for at least a couple of years when you're doing perennials. And these bins are a great way to keep them from getting too weedy, too dried out, too eaten by mice and things like that. So it's a really handy way to do it. And I can move them around where I need to. I put them in a shady spot for the summer. where they get light, but they're not going to bake or cook in the sun. So they work out really, really well. There's a few different sizes of these available. Anything that holds the tray works just fine. We got any questions yet today, Laura?
Ben joined late, and he wondered if these are poppies, but
No, not poppies. We will talk about poppies in a few weeks' time. There are a lot of misconceptions about poppies and growing the poppies from seed, especially the annual poppies. So we will talk about those in a few weeks. Many of them could be done this way. Wouldn't be a problem, but you don't have to. And we'll talk about that and how we do our poppies in a few weeks' time. Any other questions?
that's it.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. Time to hit the seed racks. We were at Vandermeer's in Ajax yesterday. They've got some wonderful seed racks out, including the West Coast seeds and Renee seeds. They've got a great selection there. So hit your good garden centers. Any of your bigger garden centers and better garden centers will have at least some of their seeds in by now, if not all their seeds. So get out, get shopping. Pick what you like. It's a really tough one, picking a bunch of seeds. You end up with a lot of seeds if you're not careful.
Quick question.
Yeah.
With the bins, where do you put them outside? Sun, shade?
So these actually just go into sort of a shady spot outside. If you've got a spot under some shrubs, under some evergreens, somewhere ideally where you could shovel snow on top of them when it snows and bury them in snow, even better. Then that snow sort of insulates and protects them a little bit and more as well. So it's a great place. I just put them underneath a bench in one of my unheated greenhouses, but it doesn't need to be there. It could be anywhere really outside. It's just an easy place for me to get at them in the winter. You know, if I've sown some things that I know only need a few weeks of cold, then I can get at them and bring them into the greenhouse, and they'll germinate in here after they've had sort of their 4 to 6 weeks of cold. So we do it that way as well. All right, we'll wrap it up.
And just remind Ben what seeds those were.
So what we did is we did Lobelia cardinalis, the cardinal flower. It's a native Ontario perennial. Spikes of brilliant red flowers. The hummingbirds love them. Great if you've got a bog garden or wet areas. That's what we sowed today, was Lobelia cardinalis. And, you know, there's a lot of perennials that you can sow this way. Look online. If you've got perennial seed and you're not sure, go to Ontario Rock Garden Society's website. Look up their germination guide. The germination guide has been worked on by members for many, many years, and it's a fantastic resource on if you need to stratify seed or not. Because if you don't, you can start them indoors. Get a jump on the game. But if you want to do it or you need the stratification, it's good to know that. So Ontario Rock Garden and Hardy Plant Society website has the excellent germination guide resource for many, many, many perennial seeds. So go there and look for that.
And speaking of getting a jump,
Oh, get the jump on spring. Boy, oh boy, it is not far away. Toronto Botanical Garden, February 22nd. We will be there. Come and say hi. We'll have tropicals, houseplants, succulents, that sort of thing available for sale that day. And of course, we'll be talking about our trips as well. We run trips to the UK and Ireland every year. We usually do 2 trips a year. Our 2025 trip in June to Cornwall is full, but we have a couple of spots left on our Lake District and Yorkshire Dales trip in August. If you're interested, email Marjorie at masonhousegardens.com. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. Keep watching.
One more question.
Oh, one more question. Oh,
What's the best way to get sunflower seeds for gardening?
sunflower seeds. You know what? Go to a good garden center that's got a good seed rack. You'll find lots. If you find a place that has the Renee seed, especially a place that has 2 or 3 racks of Renees, they probably have about I think they had about a dozen different sunflowers on their seed rack alone.
And so did West Coast Seed.
And West Coast Seed did as well, actually. Both of those places have lots of good sunflowers on their seed rack. So,
And what type of soil is best to sow sunflower seeds? And any sowing tips for them?
for sunflowers, you know what? We sow our seed in exactly the same soilless mix that we grow everything in. We don't make a change. If you want a seeding mix, you can get seeding mixes, and they're just more finely processed. So they're a little more dust-like, if you will. But we actually just use the exact same stuff that we pot everything else in. We pull out any big chunks that might be in there, but we use that. When you sow it, they're sterile mixes. They don't have any fertilizer in them, so you need to start fertilizing once seed is germinated, but you don't need to put any fertilizer in the mix to start.
And when would you sow sunflowers?
Sunflowers would be one of the last things we would sow. They germinate very quickly, and they can be tricky because they're going to want to stretch. We'll do some sunflowers, but we're not going to sow those until, a couple of weeks before they're going to be planted out. So I'm talking May the 1st, somewhere in that range, depending on the weather. We're not going to hold them in pots for long, but it's kind of a good idea not a bad idea to start sunflowers indoors, because when you put sunflower seeds out in the ground, squirrels and chipmunks get a quick, easy meal. So you need to be careful of that. But we'll talk about sunflowers in a few months' time. We'll cover those. I'll try to remember to make sure. Today we're going to wrap it up. I know we've had a long show to start, but we're getting the year kicked off. So join us every Sunday, most Sundays. We try to do every Sunday for Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. And then if you miss it on Sunday, you can catch it on our Facebook page, or we upload it to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe there and get all the videos that we do, plus about 2 years worth of back videos. So if you want to do some viewing on these cold winter days, there's a lot of content there for you already. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.